Welcome to CNI Jerusalem Calling. I'm your host today, Allison Weir. I'm Executive Director of If Americans Knew, and I'm the new president of the Council for the National Interest, the host of this show. Today, I'm very excited to have with us an extremely prominent author, professor, linguist, philosopher. Our guest today from the wilds of Massachusetts is Noam Chomsky, an American linguist, philosopher, cognitive science, and political activist. He is an institute professor and professor emeritus of linguistics at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Professor Chomsky is well known in the academic and scientific community as one of the fathers of modern linguistics. Of course, I suppose and expect he's actually much wider known throughout the United States and throughout the world as a political dissident, as an activist, as someone committed to human rights and justice, and who writes about these topics frequently, about issues all over the world. Professor Chomsky was an early critic, relatively, of Israel. When much of the left was not talking about Israeli violence and oppression of Palestinian human rights, Mr. Chomsky wrote a book called The Fateful Triangle, The United States, Israel, and the Palestinians. The book, I believe, was first published in 1983 and is still in print today. I'm hoping Mr. Chomsky is on the line with us, but I'm told that his connection is very poor. So, Professor Chomsky, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes.
Hello.
I might add that I had actually started writing and speaking about the occupation in 1967, and there were earlier books too.
That's excellent. That was actually one of my questions, was when you had first begun to write on this. So was that precipitated by, I assume, the Six-Day War in 1967, or did it precede that war?
Well, I had actually been quite critical before, but I hadn't published. The first publications were almost shortly after the 67 war, the occupation.
Okay. Now, looking back through the bio that I see on Wikipedia, and I'm sure we both know how often that's not an accurate source, but it sometimes is and sometimes has useful information. It says that you had gone to work on a kibbutz in about 1953, I believe it was.
1953, yes. My wife went back in 1955, and we thought of staying there, in fact.
I guess what's curious to any of us is, at that point, 1953 is not very many years after one of the major ethnic cleansings of the 20th century.
Sorry, I didn't hear. Not long after what?
After one of the major ethnic cleansings of the 20th century, the 1947 to 49 catastrophe, or Nakba, in which, as you know, but some listeners might not, well over 700,000 Palestinians were pushed off the land. And now, were you not aware of that?
Oh, I was very well aware of it. In fact, I had been a critic of the concept of a Jewish state even before it was established. I mean, in the 1940s, I was what was called a Zionist youth leader, but Zionism at that time included my own position, which was opposition to a Jewish state and a call for a binational settlement in the former Palestine. And I still held, one of the reasons I went to that specific kibbutz was that it was, actually its origins were as a Buberite kibbutz, and it was essentially the outreach to the Israeli Arab population, what was left of it, from Hashemeret Zair, which the kibbutz organization, which had indeed been opposed to a Jewish state up till 1948.
And I think that aspect of the history is largely unknown to many people, that there was, from fairly early on, when people arrived in Palestine and saw that it was inhabited, that there was a strain of Zionists who quickly recognized that that was a huge injustice and tried to come up with a different form of Zionism that would be this kind of binational state that you're describing your kibbutz apparently was in favor of.
There were several such groups. The one that's best known is a very small group of well-known intellectuals, Judah Magnus, Mark Buber, several others. But there was also a popular organizations which were socialist, left-wing. So a substantial part of the kibbutz movement, probably 20% or so of the labor organization, were not only calling for binationalism, but for binationalism based on Arab-Jewish working-class cooperation in a socialist state. Now, today those notions may seem odd, but they were by no means out of the ordinary in the context of the 1930s and the 1940s.
Mm-hmm. Now, today, of course, Zionism has taken on a meaning of creating specifically a Jewish state. I know
correct.
that a few years ago, I believe, I don't know the date, but that you called yourself a Zionist.
What I said was that I remain a Zionist in the sense that was of Zionism in the 1940s. Zionism has changed. That doesn't mean my views have.
Okay. And so your view today is that, what is your view of Israel today? And what would be, you feel, a fair and long-term solution?
Internally, the occupation is simply criminal. That's pretty straightforward. In fact, by as far back as late 1967, the Israeli government recognized, its legal advisors informed it, including the Attorney General, that any settlement in the occupied territories was in violation of international law. Of course, the expansion and annexation of Jerusalem was in violation not only of international law, but of explicit Security Council resolutions. And that continues. The siege up to moving till today, the siege of Gaza was once again, just a couple of weeks ago, declared by the International Committee of the Red Cross to be a violation of the Geneva Conventions, the core of humanitarian international law. So without going on with the details, it's just a criminal operation and understood to be. But within Israel itself, that is within the so-called green line, the demarcation line that's regarded as the international border, within Israel itself, there's it's a democratic state in the sense of the Western democracies. It's discriminatory. There are laws that, and more than laws, administrative practices that assign second-class citizenship to Palestinians. But in that respect, I'm sorry to say, it's not different from the United States and other Western democracies.
Well, I wonder if, I think there are probably quite a few people who would feel it's considerably worse, that the state itself identifies itself publicly as a Jewish state, that's its announced identity, which of course is systemic discrimination against any non-Jews within that state.
Yeah, that's exactly why I've been opposed to a Jewish state since the 1940s and remain so. But I was talking about the specific laws and administrative practices. We're very familiar with sharp discrimination, severe discrimination in laws and administrative practices in the United States and other Western democracies. To be be deplored, but we can't claim it doesn't exist.
Sorry, I just didn't hear your last statement.
I'm sorry?
So you feel that it's to be deplored. Many people feel that it's to be changed as well. Just much like with to be changed.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. It's to be deplored and what else? And also changed. Just as the way what? As... let me try again. It's probably hard to hear just one word. The idea is that many people feel that only focusing on the occupation is a little bit as though during the apartheid years of South Africa, activists around the world had complained only when South Africa expanded, rather than working on specifically the inherent systematized discrimination of that state itself. That in the case of Israel, focusing on the occupation to the exclusion of the systemic nature of Israel itself and the way it treats its non-Jewish citizens is also of significance. Unfortunately, I think I can hear the music coming up.
Yeah.
And that means that we're about to take a break, and we'll come right back with Professor Chomsky and CNI Jerusalem Calling. Please stay with us.
When it comes to printers, Canon technology has changed the way images and text are put to paper. Canon's laser beam printer technology has redefined both color and black and white printing standards in over 80% of the world's laser printer. Canon's bubble jet printing technology has completely revolutionized color printing by consistently delivering new innovations from personal use and home office businesses to corporate solutions. Canon printers have the technology and reliability you're looking for. Learn more at Canon.com.
Finally, guaranteed health insurance at TalkHealthPlans.com. That's right, guaranteed coverage for you or your family. Government health insurance is still years away. At TalkHealthPlans.com, you can get a free online quote in just minutes. No hassle, and best of all, it's guaranteed coverage when you log on to TalkHealthPlans.com. As a courtesy, receive a free prescription card immediately to use at over 50,000 pharmacies where you can save up to 50% on medications. And that's just for getting a quote from TalkHealthPlan.com. Even in this tough economy, you and your family can still have affordable health insurance and the peace of mind that goes with it. Don't let pre-existing conditions prevent you from getting affordable health insurance now. If you or someone you know does not have health insurance, send them to TalkHealthPlans.com. That's TalkHealthPlans.com.
The Council for the National Interest Foundation invites you to join us on our upcoming political pilgrimage through the Middle East. From Cairo to Beirut, this unique tour, which includes meetings with the leadership of 6 countries, will help you foster a deeper understanding of the real facts on the ground. For more information, email us at pilgrimage@cnionline.org. The Council for the National Interest Foundation, protecting the national interest by promoting peace.
Hi, Jack Warren here, host of the Shutterbug Magazine radio show on the WS Radio Network. You know, I hear people say they feel chained to their office desk. They spend hours stuck in traffic just to get to their office computers. They stay late, they go in on the weekends just to keep up. You know, technology is supposed to make your life easier, not more complicated. Now I have a proven solution where you work from anywhere, in any computer, with GoToMyPC. Whether it's a Mac or a PC, you can access your computer, use any program, work on any file, check your email, access network resources with GoToMyPC. GoToMyPC lets you take your office with you wherever you go. WS Radio listeners can try GoToMyPC for free for the next 30 days. For this special offer, you must visit GoToMyPC.com/talk. That's GoToMyPC.com/talk for a free trial.
Talk to me. WSRadio.com.
WS Radio DC presents CNI, Jerusalem Calling, part of the Washington Times radio network, the voice of the nation's capital.
Hello, welcome back. I'm your host today on CNI Jerusalem Calling. My name is Allison Weir. With me today, I'm very excited to have an extremely prominent writer and philosopher and scientist and activist, Professor Noam Chomsky, Professor Emeritus at MIT, who has written very powerfully and factually about Israel-Palestine for many, many years. We will be opening our phone lines early today because I'm sure so many of you welcome this opportunity to speak directly with Professor Chomsky. You can call us with your short questions and comments at 877-474-3302. Again, the number is 877-474-3302. Skype callers can Skype us at WS Radio Studio. So Skype us at WS Radio Studio or phone us with your questions or comments, and we'll be happy to give you an opportunity to speak with Noam Chomsky. Before the break, we were talking about the problem within the Israeli system itself that really transcends the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza that began in 1967. Professor Chomsky, do you feel that that's an aspect that is important to address today? And also, what is your view of what's called the one-state solution?
Well, if I can just make a comment about what you said right before the break. You said that many people think that we should pay attention to the discriminatory and repressive legal and administration system within Israel. I quite agree, which is exactly why I've been writing about it for 40 years, more than anyone I can think of. So I wrote the introduction to Sabrigirius's book, The Arabs in Israel, the first major book on the topic back in the 70s. Back around 1980, I published what I suppose is the first detailed critical examination of the racist land laws, and I continue to write about that until today, and so on. So sure, yeah, a lot of people should be concerned about that, and I'm glad that other people join me in being concerned. I wish they would do more about it. However, I'll repeat what I said before. In this respect, Israel, unfortunately, is not different from other Western democracies, including the United States. I'm sure I do not have to discuss here the way blacks and Hispanics have been treated in the U.S. and still are. So, yes, we should be concerned about that. And our priority, of course, always should be exactly where we are, right here. But sure, I would be happy to have other people join me in my own critical discussions for the last 40 years of these practices and laws in Israel, which are evolving to some extent. As for the so-called one-state solution, we have to be clear about what it means. First of all, is it calling for a single secular democratic state or for a binational state? That's a crucial difference. The call for a binational state makes perfect sense. That's why I've been supporting it since the 1940s. The idea of one secular state doesn't make much sense in complex, diverse societies. In fact, even in Europe, and this is in particular the case, I mean, there are two communities, they have different languages, different cultures, they want to maintain their own identity, they have every right to, and in a binational state, that federation or state, that could be achieved. But there's a much more serious question. We have to ask whether these proposals, let's call it a one-state proposal, whether they are intended as mere rhetoric or as actual advocacy. Now, there is a difference. It's very easy to propose, for example, that everyone should live in peace and love each other. That's a proposal. It rises to the level of advocacy when we sketch out a path from here to there. Now, as far as I'm aware, there is only one suggestion for actual advocacy today. It was different in the past. So, for example, in the early 1970s, when I wrote and spoke about it, I wrote about, published a book and many articles about moving directly to a binational state because there was a path then directly to that outcome. Now, that changed in the mid-1970s when Palestinian nationalism finally reached the international agenda. And ever since then, there has been, to my knowledge, exactly one form of actual advocacy of a binational or one-state settlement, and that's in stages, passing through first the two-state proposals of the general international consensus, moving on from there to closer integration and relations, and finally, at least I would hope, going to the kind of binational state that I've supported since the 1940s. If there's another form of advocacy, I have yet to see it. So it's fine to say the words, but if we want to be serious and advocate that settlement, we have to sketch the path from here to there. And if there's another proposal about that, I haven't seen it.
I do think there are several proposals that have been around a while, and also that many of us are not really in favor of nationalistic types of approaches. We prefer more human rights approaches. But what I'd like to do now is we have two callers, so I have to share my time with these callers. We'll take the first one who's been on the line now for, I think, at least close to 5 minutes. Jeff is calling, I believe, from Washington, D.C. Jeff, could you give us your name and your comment and questions, please? And please stay on the line. We'll allow some more follow-up exchanges as we go forward.
Yes. Hello. This is my name is Jeff Blankford. I happen to be in Washington, D.C. at the moment, although I live in California. I am actually puzzled by so much attention that we pay here in the United States to what the solution should be for the Israel-Palestine conflict. When we were kind of campaigning against, let's say, the war in Vietnam or against apartheid in South Africa, what we called for and worked mostly was for, let's say, ending the war in Vietnam, withdrawing the troops. In South Africa, we talked about sanctions and what we can do here in the United States to movement, what the solution should be. There was, of course, one man, one vote, which is something I would say for every single place, but we're not the ones here that has any kind of influence on determining what the settlement should be, whether it's one state, binational, or two states, because we actually, as a movement, have no influence. I'm much more concerned about what we can do here in the United States. And I was here in Washington Wednesday for a panel discussion which I moderated on Israel's nuclear arsenal, on how Israel was able to divert, or their agents here in the United States were able to divert highly enriched uranium to Israel back in the 60s and 70s. That was spoken by Grant Smith. We had Sasha Polakov-Saransky speaking about the Israel-South Africa nuclear connection, and Professor John Mearsheimer speaking about whether or not U.S. support for Israel is in U.S. strategic interest, and particularly their program. Now, the night before, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu came back to Washington as sort of a conqueror, and it's interesting, Dana Milbank, who writes for the Washington Post, who had criticized Professor Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt after they wrote their book on the Israel lobby, had an extraordinary article which he called Alliance or Dysfunctional Relationship. The headline was changed on the Internet, in which he said instead of flying the U.S. flag over the White House officials might have instead flown the white flag of surrender. He goes on to say on Tuesday, Obama, routed and humiliated by his Israeli counterpart, invited Netanyahu back to the White House for what might be called the Oil of Olay Summit. He said Obama totally caved into Netanyahu when it came to Israel's nuclear strategic ambiguity. And what's his name, Dana Milbank wrote, he said, Obama came to office with an admirable hope of reviving Middle East peace reports by appealing to the Arab world and positioning himself as more of an honest broker, but now he has learned the painful lesson that domestic politics won't allow such a stand. Now, Professor Chomsky for years has ignored the role of domestic politics and has insisted that the U.S. leads the rejectionist camp. And I just would wonder if being humiliated by the Israeli Prime Minister, as Obama has been now on several occasions and previous American presidents have, if this is theater designed to cover up the U.S. support for Israeli expansion of settlements, and how, if not, does this embarrassment, humiliation at the part of an Israeli Prime Minister work against U.S. strategic interests, so-called, around the world?
Unfortunately, I now hear that music, which means we have another break that's just coming up.
When you were talking about quoting
Professor
the press
Chomsky,
on
right
Obama's
after the break.
capitulation to Netanyahu.
We'll be back, Professor Chomsky, and thanks very much.
Improve your business today. Learn to do professional email marketing the right way with Captain Email. This is Chris Mertz, president of WS Radio. For years, I've helped our WS Radio hosts, advertisers, and sponsors with their email marketing strategies. As a former Marine captain and an email marketing expert, I've created a new free club at CaptainEmail.com. Permission-based email marketing to your current customers with proven strategies to reach new prospects has positively impacted many of the businesses I've worked with. CaptainEmail.com includes resources to start and grow your email list, the top 10 email marketing tips, plus a free 60-day trial with no credit card required. From brick-and-mortar businesses to communicating with your Little League team, do email marketing the right way, professionally. How many times have you checked your email today? Log on to CaptainEmail.com, and thanks for listening to WS Radio.
Listen live every Thursday from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Time to CNI Jerusalem Calling. From around the world, our panel of experts and scholars deliver hard-hitting interviews with power players and advocates of Middle East peace. Past guests have included Gideon Levy and Akiva Elder of Haaretz newspaper, Yuri Avneri, the founder of the Israeli Peace Movement, past presidential candidate for Palestine Mustafa Barghouti, and co-author of The Israel Lobby, Stephen Walt. This is CNI Foundation President Eugene Bird, inviting you to join us live from Washington every Thursday from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Time with your questions and comments. CNI Jerusalem Calling, your source for unfiltered Mideast talk radio.
This is Joe Gonzalez from Headhunter Radio, and we have on the phone Yves Lermercier, author of Reference Check 2.0 and CEO of Checkster.com. Yves, tell us how Checkster.com can help our listeners.
Well, Joe, have you ever had to check references, spend valuable time calling, leaving voicemails, and then finally when you connect with someone, you just hear them say, sorry, against company policy?
Many times, unfortunately.
Checkster.com solves that by leveraging Web 2.0 technologies and social networks so recruiters can now spend 2 minutes of their time and gather candid feedback from twice as many references.
2 minutes for twice as many references.
Yeah, that's correct. The recruiter or hiring manager simply enters the name, email address of the candidate, and the Checkster systems take over.
Where can we learn more?
You go to Checkster.com, CheckSter.com, to get started right away, and you will be amazed of the value you can get for as little as $40.
Talk to me. WSRadio.com.
WS Radio DC presents CNI Jerusalem Calling, part of the Washington Times Radio Network, the voice of the nation's capital.
Welcome back. This is Allison Weir with our guest today, Professor Noam Chomsky. We have two callers on the line. Jeff Blankford has been asked a question that I just will get Professor Chomsky's answer. And then Kathleen from Athens has been waiting patiently. Thank you, Kathleen. Hold on a little bit longer. I believe we also dropped a call from someone named Hal. So, Hal, please feel free to try calling back in a little while. I was dropped by two, so sometimes we do have these technical difficulties. But right now, I guess basically Jeff's question was a question of the power of the Israel lobby that has become, I think, even more blatant in recent months and certainly years, although it's been a major force for many, many years. And Jeff Blankford is raising that question. Professor Chomsky, what would you like to say to Jeff's earlier comment?
Actually, what in retail commerce is called a teaser. Once they send those high-tech weapons to Israel, then Saudi Arabia, the other Emirates, come along and say, well, we want them too, and the U.S. military industry can provide them, at which they, of course, pay for, with masses of less advanced weaponry. And in general, military and intelligence cooperation between Israel and the United States has been very close for many years. So sure, there are many factors that, domestic factors that we should definitely pay attention to when we consider how policy is formed. I don't quite understand why I'm being asked that question since I've been doing just that for many years, including right now. But with regard to Obama's so-called capitulation, if you read what he said, it's basically reiterating what he said all along. There's no new capitulation. It's just the collapse of illusions, which shouldn't have been there in the first place.
That's right. Now, just to get to some of the tactics involved, I remember a few years ago I was at UC Berkeley when the question was asked when following your lecture about Israel-Palestine, about boycotting Israel. And at that time, you spoke against using boycott, sanctions, and divestments against Israel. Do you still feel that way, or do you now agree that boycott, sanctions, and divestment, a movement that has grown considerably, is a strategy that you endorse?
Look, I really cannot deal with the rumors that circulate in the Internet gossip system. I mean, I've been in favor of divestment since 2002. In fact, before the movement was even formed, I was one of the sponsors of one of the first efforts. And I've repeatedly supported, and in fact have often been one of the initial supporters of divestment efforts. What I have opposed is BDS proposals that harm Palestinians. If we're serious about BDS or any other tactic, we want to ask what the consequences are for the victims. I mean, we have to distinguish always in tactical judgments between what you might call feel-good tactics and do-good tactics. I mean, there are tactics that may make people feel good. Look, I feel good, I'm doing something. But maybe they harm the victims. There are other kinds that actually do good. That is, they benefit the victims. That's a distinction we have to make. And it's a critical one. I've discussed what I think about it. But where there are actual do-good efforts of BDS, I've always supported them. In fact, long before the program became even announced itself.
Yes, and we certainly agree with that. Agreed that many people would rather look good than really do something that will be effective and successful. So I think we both feel very strongly that it's important to do something valuable, not just look like you are. But in terms of the Internet rumors, I was actually in the audience when you spoke at Berkeley and answered the question about boycott and recommended against boycott at that time.
No,
so this is not a rumor.
What was the question? Where did you hear this?
The question was whether you supported boycott against Israel, and you said no at that time. A number of us were very surprised at that.
I still oppose boycotts. So yes, I do oppose a boycott. I think that's harmful to Palestinians. And the reason it's harmful is very obvious. It is so hypocritical then it discredits the whole effort.
But
I mean, why boycott Israel and not boycott the United States, which is a much worse record?
Well, I think many
positions
people
that are.
I think many people actually.
May I continue?
I just wanted to interrupt with one point, is that Palestinian civil society is very unified, issued a call signed by dozens and dozens of diverse organizations, all calling for boycott. So here are the Palestinians themselves calling for it.
There are groups who call themselves Palestinian Civil Society who are calling for boycott, and I think they're making a mistake, and I've explained why. I'm not going to to adopt positions which have already been and will continue to be quite harmful to Palestinians. If you want to, then do it. But it's clear why the call for boycott has been harmful for Palestinians and will continue to be. The reason is very simple. It is so utterly hypocritical that it's basically a gift to hardliners. They can say, look, you're calling for a boycott of Israel, but you're not calling for a boycott of the United States, which has a much worse record, and in fact is even responsible for most of Israel's crimes. So therefore, if your position is that hypocritical, how can we even take you seriously? That's like giving a gift to the most hardline elements. On the other hand, there are very sensible proposals, like, for example, the Berkeley proposal, which, in fact, I was one of the early supporters of. They called for divestment from U.S. corporations which are involved in activities in the occupied territories. Yeah, that makes good sense for two reasons. For one reason is it's not hypocritical. It's directed right where it ought to be, to ourselves, and say, look, we ought to stop carrying out criminal acts. For another, it's completely justifiable. And in fact, it even conforms to U.S. law and international law. So sure, things like the Berkeley divestment effort make a lot of sense. Same with the Hampshire effort, same with many others. But there are proposals which are just of the feel-good variety. And it doesn't matter who supports them. There's still the objective fact is that they have hurt and will continue to harm the victims who we're trying to protect for reasons that are very simple and straightforward.
Well, of course, there's a massive amount of evidence in numerous books that U.S. support of Israel damages U.S. interests and has been argued against by much of the establishment in the United States since before the formation of Israel. It was well documented in Donald Neff's books, in books by Kathleen Christensen, by Paul Findlay, by George Ball, most recently by Walton Mearsheimer. A number of military officers are once again, many people think this is new, this is for decades, have been saying that Israel is a strategic liability to the United States. The reason that there is, as you point out, massive support for Israel by the United States is the work of a very powerful lobby. We know that lobbies in Washington, D.C. are often powerful, and they often set legislation, especially if there's almost no counter-lobby. So in this case, we have had a very powerful, very focused lobby setting the agenda in Washington, D.C., even when military officers and the oil lobby, originally the Aramco lobby, was actively opposing support for Israel. So for that reason, many people feel it is quite appropriate to boycott Israel itself, in addition to U.S. corporations and U.S. Americans that support human rights abuses anywhere. But Israel itself is a nation, a sovereign nation, and usually would be the target of such a boycott, and usually someone like you would endorse that. So I find it surprising that you don't. But let me go on.
I find your commitment to harming Palestinians quite surprising. It is quite obvious why a call for the boycott to Israel is a gift to AIPAC. It's a gift because they can point out at once that it is utterly hypocritical. We are not boycotting the United States, for example, which has a much worse record, and in fact is responsible, as you just said, for a great deal of Israel's criminal behavior. So and this has happened in the past. I can give you cases if you want, where calls like the kind you are advocating have, in fact, for good reasons, harmed the victims we're trying to protect. May I continue?
Well, you've just
let me continue. You made a lot of points, and I'd like to comment on them. If you don't want me to comment, then let's just stop the discussion.
No, but I think an exchange is valuable sometimes. But please
then let's have an exchange on what you said, okay? I mentioned one part of it. The one part that I object to is your support for efforts which are basically gifts to the hardliners. But you made another point about the many claims that support for Israel is opposed to the U.S. national interest. Well, the term national interest these are all very vague notions, but let me return to what I said before. The strongest support for Israel in the United States comes from the business sector. That's why the Wall Street Journal is the most strong pro-Israel journal. That's why you get increasing high-tech investment in Israel. That's why you have things. That's why the military lobby supports it. Now, you can argue that this is against something called the national interest, whatever that is. But insofar as the national interest is determined by powerful domestic forces in the United States.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're at a break, and we'll come right back. Thank you.
When it comes to purchasing your next digital camera, there is only one name you need to remember: Canon. Since 1996, Canon has sold more than 100 million compact digital cameras. Their product line covers the gambit from simple to shoot to the camera that the pros use, with eye-popping results. For those priceless family shots, Canon is the name you can trust. To check out their entire line, log on to Canon.com. That's the only name you need to know, Canon.com.
The bottom line is social media can add to your bottom line. This is Angie Swartz, host of Twitter Talk Radio. To learn how social media can work for you, log on to freesocialmedianewsletter.com. Receive regular, short, helpful tips that will show you how social media can take your company to the next level. It is absolutely free and worth every penny. That is freesocialmedianewsletter.com. freesocialmedianewsletter.com.
For more than 20 years, through our education and media activities, the Council for the National Interest Foundation has worked to encourage U.S. Mideast policies that are consistent with the national interest and promote peace abroad. Join our email newsletter by visiting www.cnionline.org. Feel free to submit your tax-deductible donation by clicking the Donate button under the About Us screen. Get your copy of the Council for the National Interest DVD documentary series, Islam and Democracy, the Obama Moment in the Middle East, and Palestine in the American Congress for only $15 by emailing us at film@cnionline.org. The Council for the National Interest, serving our national interests by promoting peace.
From the newest Apple iPhone to the latest BlackBerry, Droid, or iPad, businesses are racing to use smartphones to provide content to their customers in real time to make informed decisions. Is your company positioned for the mobile application market? Is your website mobile compatible? WS Radio is proud to partner with one of the leading mobile software companies in the world. MentorMate has been programming mobile solutions since 2001 with 10 years of mobile application development experience. They provide companies with a broad range of services, from creating custom iPhone apps to full-service custom software development. Because of their proven experience in the evolving mobile application market, MentorMate is leading the way with battle-tested solutions. Beware of startups. Experience is what counts. Go with a proven leader. For a free consultation, go to mentormate.com/voice of mobile. That's mentormate.com/voice of mobile.
Talk to me. WSRadio.com.
WS Radio DC presents CNI, Jerusalem Calling, part of the Washington Times radio network, the voice of the nation's capital.
Welcome back. This is Allison Weir with our guest today, Noam Chomsky. Just to set the record straight, and then I do want Mr. Chomsky to have as much time as he would like to answer my questions. But just to set the record straight, the Palestinian civil society that has called for a boycott consists of over 30 groups. There are more, I'm looking here, it's actually close to 100 groups. And there are groups such as the Union of Palestinian Farmers, a number of different groups such as the Union of Health Work Committees of Gaza, the Union of Palestinian Agricultural Relief Committees, the Health Work Committees, the Union of the Consortium of Professional Associations. So this is really a widespread call. Now, Mr. Chomsky may feel that it's not an effective call, but it's certainly what Palestinians themselves seem to be asking for. Just to clarify the facts on that particular issue. But I know, Mr. Chomsky, you had more that you wanted to address than what I had said.
Yes, I did address more of it, and I think I spoke for a while, and I think it was cut off by an advertisement. So I suppose there's no point trying to repeat it. I discussed the rest of the points that you had made about domestic foreign policy and the national interest. Can repeat that if you like. But just to keep, they were quite incorrect. But to repeat, just to keep to this point, there are segments of Palestinian society that have called for a boycott. We have to ask whether we should follow that advice or whether we should consider what the consequences of it are. And that the consequences are, in fact, quite clear. There have been, we've already had illustrations of it. I can give you examples if you like. They are, in fact, the calls are so hypocritical, for the reason I mentioned, that they're simply a gift to the hard right. Most hardline supporters of Israeli expansion and oppression. Now, and there's perfectly good reasons for it. As soon as such proposals are made, the response will be from the hardliners, you're a complete hypocrite. You're not calling for a boycott of the United States, which isn't, or England, or on and on. And I don't see any point in putting guns in the hands of the oppressors, which is exactly what that call is. That's quite independent of who asks for it. We have to make our decisions on the basis of the likely consequences. And I think in this case it's quite clear. With regard to the so-called national interest, I'll repeat what I said, which was cut off by the ad, if you like, or just drop it. I
think we did hear that. At least I did hear your reference to the Wall Street Journal, for example, so I did hear that part. If there
Sorry?
was more Sorry. I did hear your discussion about the Wall Street Journal and your suggestion that it was the business community that really promotes Israel and it's not the Israel lobby. That I guess you don't think... It's a little ironic, though, because here you are clearly very, very concerned about AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and yet you seem to suggest that it's not significant. Okay, this is Allison. Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties. That was the second time my call has been dropped. So thanks. Any listeners that are still there, thanks for being patient with us. Apparently Noam Chomsky is now not on the line either, but we expect to be able to reach him again in a few minutes. Just to reiterate, he feels that that AIPAC and the many different factors within the Israel lobby do not set U.S.